Hello.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Well, where are you at?
Not so sunny Wales in the
Nice.
UK.
Right on.
How about yourself?
Denver, Colorado.
Fantastic. Good mountains.
Yeah.
Fatih.
Yes.
Fatih, I have a construction happening outside my house today, unexpectedly, by the city. So it's quite loud right now. I don't even know if that's being picked up and you can hear it, but in case it gets too loud, then maybe, would it be all right if you did?
Yeah, no problem. So let me share my screen then. So which screen do you see? Do you see the HackMD?
HackMD.
Yeah, you see that one, yeah? Okay. So yeah, while we wait a minute or two more, if everyone can put their names on the meeting minutes. Let me.
Could you share a link, please? It's having trouble.
Yeah, I am.
Things in my inbox.
I'm trying to find chat box. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's the bane of my existence, finding chat box in Zoom.
Yeah. When
you're presenting.
Yeah, it's like controls can be improved. So the link is on the chat, and we have very light agenda today. We will start with action item review, followed by a quick discussion on the roadmap, which we moved to the repo as pull request. And then we will have a Spinnaker presentation from Cameron from Armory. And if you have additional topics, you can add them to the agenda, and we can spend time on that topic today as well, given the light agenda.
Yeah, I've got a topic I'll add in, not too long, but it'd be nice to just run it by folks here.
Yeah. So yeah, we can start with the action items. So the first action item was on me about updating the invitation with HackMD link. I don't think it happened yet. Let me check the issue. Yeah, it's still open. Let me ping Jackie. So we keep that open. And the next action item is on Marquee, and I believe that's been fixed because I've seen some conversations on the issues, and Marquee is not with us yet. So yeah, we commented there and it's been done, so we can mark it as done. And that's all the action items we had, unless I miss something else. No, it looks like those were the only two. And the next item in the agenda is the roadmap. We have been working since February or something, and it got 4 approvals, and it's been there since 2 weeks. And I suppose we can merge this in, and any updates we need to do can be done using new pull requests. So anyone wants to raise a concern or any last minute comment, whether if we should merge this in or not. Okay, I got thumbs up from Kara. Everyone is quiet, so okay. Then we merge that in after the meeting. And that was all the items in the agenda. So Tracy, you mentioned an item. If you want, we can take it now, or
great. Sorry, I was just looking up the link.
Yeah.
So it was something that came up in Jenkins X. So folks were asking for an official Helm chart for Tecton pipelines. And this is a long issue, but I think where it got to is that Jenkins X actually maintains a Helm chart for Tecton, and the Tecton folks, were not too fussed about having that in the Tecton project itself. But if we go down the comments, someone had made a suggestion, I think Maurizio Salatino, that we might want to push for something like CD Foundation to maintain the chart as a joint collaboration of multiple open source projects interested in having the charts. And then he pinged that to James Rawlings, and James says it makes sense. So I would like to think about, if we could do that, and does it make sense, first of all, to have it in that place? What would it look like beyond just creating it, like CDF having this library of Helm charts? And I think I'd love to get people's opinions, and then if it seems like it makes sense and we can think through kind of how it would work, then I can go ahead and try to get it done.
Just for what it's worth, I mean, Jenkins X is currently using a little older one, so I think it would be good to have one that tracks the latest Tecton anyway. And just from a technical point of view, you could use just the GitHub repo as the to host the Helm chart as well. What I mean by that is, I don't think you'd need much else. You wouldn't need a chart repository, for example. I think we could just do in the Git repository would be enough.
Okay, and how would we scope it? Would it just be like a GitHub repo on the CD Foundation GitHub, and it's called Helm charts?
Yeah. Well, you'd probably want a separate repo per Helm chart. So maybe it would be Tecton Helm chart and something along those lines. And then it would be about how the changes get notified, because you'd want to keep the image, the image tags in that Git repository automatically up to date. Ideally, you'd have some automated testing around that as well.
Okay. And I don't think that's too unreasonable. I mean, we've already got a couple of repos which have code for things like the CI/CD landscape, and some bots merely going around doing that. And so you mentioned it's not just a case of taking the one from Jenkins X, but updating it, or how would you approach it?
I would personally, but probably there's nobody from the Tecton project on the line, I guess. So, at the moment. So yeah, we could start with that as a good basis. We've been using that on Jenkins X. I noticed somebody mentioned there was another link for another Helm chart, so maybe we do a diff of the two, and just to check, mention it on to the Tecton Slack channel to say, look, this is what we're thinking. And anybody got any other thoughts? What should be in there? It's fairly simple. What gets included? Yeah.
And does that make sense in the context of this interoperability group, that it's like CDF is the owner of these things, or the place to house things that fall across the boundaries of different projects?
I like the sound of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from other folks? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense because like this, like it's similar to Go SCM discussion we had a few weeks ago. Like there is no clear owner, and the community is like I don't know, they may not be they may not be sure about how to handle them because they don't feel they own that thing, because it's like cross community type of thing. And now we have two examples. We can perhaps, you know, propose something to talk, because talk should be aware of this, I suppose, CDF talk. And we can say this is kind of under interoperability topic, and this is the way we want to approach this. Like this type of libraries or the people maintaining these libraries can come and present their case to the SIG, and SIG just, yeah, it's great. Let's reach out to CDF operations and get a repo for you. And then those people who actually bring the topic become maintainers of that. And anyone from the SIG and wider CDF could contribute to those repos. So that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I like that as a kind of overview of the process. Great. Anyone else want to chime in with any thoughts whatsoever?
I had a quick, hi, I'm Dave Sudia. I'm joining for the first time today. I just had a quick question on why lots of repos or a repo per project versus a larger repo that holds many.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's a good question because it's probably coming from a Jenkins X mindset, that one. We tend to tag a release every single merge to master. We tend not to use monoliths on that. So you then, if you merge a pull request into your master branch, you then need to re-release all the charts inside that Git repository. So they'd all, if you updated one chart, another chart would also get a version upgrade as well. So, but the images inside it may not have changed. So that's typically how Jenkins X does performance releases. This kind of Trump-based development, making sure that you release on every merge to master.
Also,
could be other approaches.
Targeted repos are best practice anyway. You want to have as little in the repo that's targeted towards a particular function, and that's it. So when things change and you have to rebuild, if you've got it hooked up to a CD pipeline, it only builds that function, and that's it, and nothing else, and not the entire world.
Sure. I mean, I'll buy that. I'm not challenging it. I'm just coming from more the end user. I consume the stable repo, you know, and just used to seeing more of that approach to it. So yeah, I'm no challenge against it though.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I enjoyed hearing the answers. I think as a separate kind of topic, we're getting to a point at CDF where I think we're going to be having more of these discussions around, you know, what are best practices, especially when we're talking about kind of modern CI/CD, and what are the implications of those practices? What additional tooling do we need to support them? Because I think many people, myself included, would approach it for, you know, why not just have one repository and dump a whole bunch of stuff in there rather than proliferate various ones? So, yeah, and I think, good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're doing automated testing against a cluster or something, I could certainly see the maintainability of a chart per repo being much easier.
Yeah, there's something just as I guess a side note, talking point. Jenkins X doesn't have great support for mono repos. It's something that we'd want to, but it does come down to only like the Google projects. Look, they have these great mono repos, and they have things like Bazel that only build certain parts of the tree based on certain changes. I don't think we've got anything quite advanced as that yet, but something love to see. And I think maybe with that, it would help the point you make, David, and maybe we could make use of mono repos potentially. Because I know some people, I think it's a bit like Marmite. Some people love them, some people hate them. So.
Okay, great. So I think from all that discussion, my next steps will be to sync with somebody from the Tecton community, either Christy or anyone else who wants to weigh in and just give it a stamp of approval, and then just take that to the talk and get that set up, but make sure ultimately the talk oversees any process or governance around it. And yeah, I think we should just push that forward and make people aware that CDF can kind of host some of these things and help folks converge, or just make life easier for folks working across different tools.
For what it's worth, I think that could also pave the way for other things that we've talked about in the past around specifications, shared metadata, things like environments or what an environment is, and having kind of specifications that we can have a repo or something there that actually generates these specs as well, easily to consume from providing interop between different projects. They could consume these specs, these APIs.
So the other bit of support I'd put forward for this is just, again, so, I'm on a team of 3 in the company I'm in, and we, for the most part, rely on pre-built things for any tool that, we're not making. And it's always hard to, we're doing like a Prometheus adapter in our Kubernetes cluster this week, and it's by DirectX 12. And he's very talented, but it's like anything that comes from, the CDF or whatever is going to, I put much more faith in that. So like for me, the thing as an end user of having it be with the foundation is it's a lot easier for me to be like, oh yeah, that's the one I should use, versus even Jenkins owning a Tecton thing. Well, why? Yeah, so.
That's great feedback. And I think underlines the responsibility CDF should have as well to keep things in a good state and well maintained, and kind of example of best practices. And just as a side note, David, I don't know how much you've seen of past meetings and what we do here, but we love folks who are happy to talk about what they're doing, maybe do a presentation or a demo. So I just want to seed some thoughts if you do have some aspect of what you and your team are doing that you're able to and would like to share. I think Patty and Kara can help get you scheduled in for an upcoming meeting. Okay,
good to know. I watched a couple or chunks of a couple meetings. I figured the first couple I'd do my best to just listen, although I'm already talking, but
I like it. Get stuck in.
And been nominated to do a demo as well, so that's not bad going for 18 minutes in. Good work.
I have been known as some DevOps. Well, I think it was Marky Jackson who showed up, and he found himself running the whole afternoon session and then a town hall meeting the next day. So yeah, just welcome, everybody get stuck in. Cool. Okay, back to you, Fatty and Kara. I think if we're done with that.
Yeah, I think this like hand chart discussion, and again going back to GoSCM, I think that it would be great to again what David mentioned, like if we somehow could gather these things, just making them visible would be a contribution. Forget about like making them better, because like all of us are having like needs in similar areas, and just listing them and pointing to their repositories and people who are contributing to those could help people to find those things rather than looking at personal repositories and Googling things. Yeah. So that could be a great, like, might make lives of many people a lot better. So yeah, just want to share that.
+1 for visibility. Great.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that topic, Tracy. And do you have any other topics? Yeah.
On the GoSCM, well, I was going to ask Kara. I know, Kara, you shared a little update on the directions. I wondered if you could share that with the group, just as a, it's not fallen off our radar.
Yes. So I've contacted the GoSCM drone folks, essentially, and they are open to attending one of the SIG meetings, so we can arrange that. I do need to set it up maybe with some Tecton folks and just organize what we will discuss with them. And then I wasn't sure from our side how much we were building out this library of different projects or utilities that are used across projects. But if we are moving forward with it, and this official Helm chart for Tecton would be like, it's great. Like, I think that helps us discuss that more clearly with the drone folks as we begin to build out this library. We know more what to say to them, but I can move forward with contacting them. I maybe will need to liaise with you, Tracy, about contacting some of the Tecton folks as well and pulling them in. Does that sound good?
Yep, happy to help.
Yep, thanks, Cara. So if that's all, then we can turn to Cameron. And
sweet, how's it going?
good. Thanks for joining, and thanks for the upcoming presentation. So I stop sharing. You
Cool.
start.
And hey everyone, I'm Cameron. I am a software engineer over at Armory, and I've been working on the Spinnaker project for about the last year and a half, ever since I joined Armory. So this is my first time working in an open source project. Just to give some background, let's see, I'm the tech lead for the extensibility team at Armory, as well as the co-lead for the platform SIG for Spinnaker. I'm joined today by Ryan. He's the PM who is working on our team. You guys can see the screen and everything and hear me all right?
Yes.
Cool, sweet. All right, so I just want to give a really quick overview of what Spinnaker is, and just high level, really high level. This will probably look pretty familiar to everyone. We have microservices. So Spinnaker itself is comprised of 10 microservices. There's different microservices for different pieces of functionality, right? So in this architecture diagram we have on the right, we have the items in green, which are interactable, I guess, microservices. So we have deck, which is our front end, and then we have anyone else who wants to be an API caller, you hit the gate service, apologies. All in all, there's just a lot of microservices, and contributing to the project is not actually the easiest because of all these microservices going on. So what does Spinnaker do? Well, you can configure and run pipelines. Pipelines are comprised of stages and tasks. I watched an earlier episode, maybe episode is not the right term, but I watched an earlier recording of one of these meetings, and it looks like there's some good terminology around the different projects, talking about pipelines, stages, tasks, and how they relate to Tecton and Jenkins terminology. So we use the idea of stages and tasks, and pipeline is the overarching object that contains those. So Spinnaker itself, you run pipelines. Pipelines deploy your infrastructure. Within Spinnaker, you can view and manage your infrastructure. So it's pretty cool. You can say, hey, look, I've got all these Kubernetes clusters and they're running all these pods, and you can see it within Spinnaker itself. You can also view logs, so it's a pretty nice one-stop shop for a bunch of SDLC type work. So let's go on. So I just want to talk about the evolution of extensibility within Spinnaker, because Spinnaker itself has been designed as a extensible project from the start, but that means extensibility is means different things at different, let's say, stages of a project's lifecycle. So when Spinnaker first came out, and this is how a lot of people will extend projects in the early days of a project, Spinnaker basically publishes all the open source jars so anyone can consume them. So the idea of extending Spinnaker in the past has been, hey, pull in these open source jars, add some custom code on top of it, manage your own builds, your own releases, and you're off to the races. It requires a bunch of Java knowledge as well as deep knowledge of the architecture I showed above, or I showed earlier. So this is great. There's not much sharing of extension code between different groups running Spinnaker, right? This is everyone has their own Spinnaker installation that they have customized for their own purposes. Everyone had to figure out their own way of building, their own way of releasing, et cetera, et cetera. This worked. This is how we and some of the original creators of the project, like Netflix, have been extending Spinnaker, but we wanted to improve this. So we added a stage called the run job stage. And essentially what the run job stage is, you can run any Kubernetes job as a stage. So there's inputs, right, to a stage, and then there's outputs, both in terms of key value pairs as well as artifacts. So this was great. Any user of Spinnaker could create a pipeline, assuming you have the correct permissions, of course. You can configure your pipeline and push up a container to do some job that you call via this run job stage. It was pretty customizable. You can run in any language you want. You run a container, inputs, outputs, off to the races, right? So this was great. This was, fortunately and unfortunately, let's say, different use cases, right? It's configured per pipeline. So if you wanted to share this within your organization, that was not an easy thing to do. Each team would configure their own pipelines. You know, from what I've seen users do, different teams would configure their own pipelines, and they would have their own run job stages custom to their team. But then central DevOps toolings teams wanted to have best practices kind of built in and shared amongst their organization. So let's go on to the next slide. So we have this idea of a custom job stage. So this is a little bit different. Rather than having end users, app developers create containers and use them within their pipelines, this is the Spinnaker operators, the team operating Spinnaker, that is. They are basically doing the same exact thing. They are defining a stage using YAML and containers, and then adding that to their Spinnaker installation. What that means is that stage is now available within Spinnaker as a native stage. So you can add another stage and the UI is present and it looks all native and works nicely within Spinnaker. So that's a great way of sharing best practices amongst your organization. This was not easy, though, to share across organizations. So if you are a third-party vendor and want to write a plugin for, let's say, APM, you would not be able to share that very easily. Enter this plugin framework that we've been working on. So it's a lot more than just stages, and I'll get to that in a sec. But it's based on the existing plugin framework for Java. It's called PF4J. Pretty, I don't know, the name is great, PF4J, PF for Java. So it's kind of recursive, I guess. Added to Spinnaker by the team operating Spinnaker. So again, that is like the central DevOps tooling team will add a plugin to the running Spinnaker installation, and then the whole organization can take advantage of that functionality. This, again, shares best practices not only amongst Spinnaker users in an organization, but amongst the whole community itself. The idea that we've been trying to push with the plugin framework is we want to lower the barrier of entry for extending Spinnaker functionality. As I showed earlier, Spinnaker is kind of a beast, and we would like to lower the barrier of entry there. So right now, adding to the plugin framework, it does require Java or Kotlin knowledge. And if you want to have a front-end component, it does require some React knowledge. So this is an example of some how some plugins would work within Spinnaker. We have a couple of these written today. So there's the idea of a custom stage plugin, and you can see in the case of adding an additional cloud provider to Spinnaker, which is a piece of code that will interact and mutate the cloud. You would have a UI portion that's written in React, and that is relevant to the deck piece of code, the deck service. There's an orchestration portion. You're going to have to create the stage object itself, which lives in Orca, the stage object. And then there's a piece of functionality about interacting with the cloud, and that would be added to Cloud Driver. So part of the reason we wanted to do the plugin framework is have all this functionality be co-located within one repo, rather than having a PR to deck, a PR to Orca, and a PR to Cloud Driver, or 3 separate plugins. You have one plugin repo, and all this, all the feature code is co-located together. So that's an example of a custom stage. We will also we also have things like different types of notification listeners. So we can send metrics or consume metrics from different providers. So Spinnaker itself produces a bunch of metrics. We can send those metrics through Echo to any different provider we choose. So what we've been doing is throughout the code, we've been adding these extension points or long-term contracts in a certain package within each of these projects. All the code that goes in there, all the interfaces are considered long-term stable, and we want to ensure that those are stable contracts for developers to build against. Let's see. One thing I wanted to mention with Spinnaker extensibility, not with the plugin framework actually itself, but within, so all these microservices have a shared library called Quark that they all consume. This library Quark has the plugin code on the plugin framework code there, which is why all the services have the plugin functionality. It has Quark itself, the library has more than just plugin functionality in there, however. It also has functionality like secret engines. So all these services know how to decrypt secrets. So you can point to a secret in Vault and say, hey, Cloud Driver, your kubeconfig file is over there in Vault. We don't have to have it checked into Git. So you can have a GitOps workflow. Why am I bringing this up? Well, what we noticed with the project, and one of the reasons why this plugin framework I think is so cool, is we noticed that another company, I believe it was Nike, they brought in our Quark library. They didn't have anything to do with Spinnaker. They said, hey, there's this cool secret engine library. Let's use it and build on top of it. So this was just an interface in a library that we had in our in a shared library for Spinnaker, and they took it, they built on top of it, and they contributed the secret engine back to the Spinnaker project. So that was really cool to see, like, hey, this piece of functionality we wrote, this interface of secret engine, it's useful for not just within the Spinnaker project, but within whatever type of project you want to use that decrypts secrets. So I thought that was an interesting story, especially for the interoperability SIG. It would be really cool if we could have different plugins or types of functionality that we could just kind of pass between each other. Cool. So next steps and future directions. So far, what we've been shooting for is this lean core and expansive ecosystem. So the lean core part, we have not been focusing on as much. We've been focusing on adding ways to add additional functionality. Soon we want to start focusing as well on slimming down the features that are in the core product offering and ripping out non-core functionality into plugins. We want to continue lowering the barrier of entry to extending Spinnaker. And one of the main things we want to do is get away from forcing people to run or write their plugins in Java or Kotlin. So we want to move towards extending Spinnaker via APIs. So we're doing a lot of the foundational work right now in order to do that. and hopefully we'll be seeing that in the future. Any questions?
Thanks very much for that presentation. That's great to hear that the Spinnaker monolith is being worked on and being, there's effort to break it up. Me and my company, we did a pretty extensive evaluation of Spinnaker end of 2018. I know that's a year and a half from now. A year and a half ago. But at the time, or soon after that, we were told that Orca, the orchestration engine, was in the process, our Armory was in the process of replacing that with something else, perhaps with Tecton. Did that work? Now, this question has nothing to do with what's presented, but did that ever go through?
That did not go through. However, we've talked about it, and I'm not speaking for Spinnaker at all or Armory. That's something that I think would be a pretty cool integration and thing to have. I don't think we're tied to our pipeline format in any sense. That's not necessarily something that is our bread and butter, let's say. So yeah, moving towards Tecton is definitely something I think we're interested in doing. Whether we have the time or whether we prioritize that is another question. But I think joining these meetings, the interoperability SIG meetings, and learning more about how we could take advantage of that would give us maybe more ammo to help drive the project in that direction.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, no, just adding to that, I think we, in this interoperability group, and certainly Dan Lawrence, our top chair, he's trying to figure out how we can have more of a kind of interoperability summit, which brings folks together and of all the different projects, so we can just hash things out and figure out how to make things easier if let's say, Tecton integration or just integration across projects and understanding what each project has that others could use. So yeah. Like the direction, and it's good to have that deeper understanding of what you're doing with Spinnaker.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, would love to collaborate. That's what we're trying to do. Cool. Any more questions?
Just a quick question. Would you? I guess you mentioned about moving more to APIs. Would you see future plugins being non-Java based?
Yeah, that's the idea. So right now there is a method of doing non-Java based or half and half, where you can write a portion of your plugin in Java that is the staged part, and you can have that call out to whatever your service is. So we have a plugin SDK where you can make HTTP, make it easy so you can make like requests and stuff. So you can talk to, a third-party service. We have some internal plugins that, or some internal features that we actually will put in another container within the Spinnaker cluster and talk to that. And so we're working on figuring out how we want to do that going forward, because, how should I say this? Your services need to be able to talk to the other services within Spinnaker. So there might be some deployment concerns. So we're kind of figuring all that out. But the idea is, yes, we want to move away from requiring people to write in Java. Ideally, write a container. Maybe it registers itself to some registry service or something, and then you're off to the races. That's what we're trying to get to.
That's awesome. So I work on Jenkins X, and it would be really, I'd love to see, almost to what Tracy was saying, I'd love to see some kind of nicer integrations because we use Tecton already as well. So trying to understand where those lines could be drawn, but I think it'd be really interesting to look at some integrations. So just one actual quick other follow-up question. And this may be a silly question, so apologies. Is
Oh, sure.
presumably Spinnaker is still, it's a large focus of Spinnaker is non-container based. Is that right?
Let's see. So that I think there's two different parts of that. Let's see, the way that I see most people running Spinnaker itself is in Kubernetes
Right.
and container based. Now the targets are not always Kubernetes or container based.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's correct. It's a multi-target, multi-cloud platform where you can deploy your workloads to different types of clouds. Like, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So
cool.
hopefully,
So, but, yeah. Yeah.
the
Sorry,
hope
go on.
is that, different plugins can hopefully help people move from their old, data centers and everything to the cloud. The idea with plugins is, hey, they might have some sort of functionality that is, some service that is really custom to their company, their organization, and they don't necessarily want that to be put into the core offering. They also don't want to maintain their own build and release process so they can release their code. So ideally, they can just add this plugin, this little piece of functionality within their Spinnaker installation, and then they can move on to the cloud. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, one of Jenkins X's areas is it is mainly deployments to Kubernetes. So I could definitely see some integration, whether that's in the form of a plugin or however it might look, to be able to support the vast number of integrations that Spinnaker has to be able to deploy out to Amazon or anywhere, non-container based, non-Kubernetes based deployments. So that's really quite exciting.
Yeah, I think I'll be joining more of these in the future.
I had another question just about the different language integrations. Like, what's the motivation for that? Is it focused on any one or two languages? Is it just like, is it JavaScript? Is it Python? Because it's
Totally.
like a lot of effort.
That's a great question. So we kind of surveyed who would be creating plugins, right? Who would be the users creating plugins? And a lot of the times it kind of comes down to the central DevOps tooling teams, and they're focused mostly on Python and Golang from what we've seen. Bash, of course, as well, but ideally people are writing plugins more in more type languages or solid programming languages, let's say.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah, we've gotten that feedback that not everyone wants to program in Java these days.
Yeah,
which is understandable.
Yeah, I used to work in the Eclipse ecosystem, and it was the same thing. And Python was motivated by all these folks kind of doing data science and integrating there. And we ended up doing, like, there's a platform called Py4j, which is Python to Java, and just using that as a way to get a quick bridge, which was pretty nice. Connecting the interpreted language to Java and all the fun that comes with that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Bindings between languages are fun. There's some gotchas there though.
It's also potentially an interesting way to get the persona who we typically think of as an end user of Spinnaker, because it's usually Spring Boot developers, Java developers of different ilks. And so now they have an opportunity to actually contribute via this plugin system, which, that's a huge community to tap into. So it's an interesting experiment.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of community, I guess, so we've been running this, we call it a gardening days event. So it's this whole last week, we've been having we had a kickoff session, I guess, where we had a couple meetings where we spun up a Kubernetes cluster and gave attendees access to their own namespace that they have access to for, I think, about a week or so. And it's kind of like a hackathon, but a laid back hackathon. So it's like you work on your project the whole week, and then at the end there is a short hackathon. But we've done 2 of these now, and at the first time, the plugin framework was pretty it's in like a early state, and not too many people created plugins, but we did have some early partners in that creating plugins. This second time we've been doing it, the documentation's improved a bunch. We had some more trainings and some more workshops, and it's been really great to see. There's a lot more teams just hopping on and building plugins. They don't have to know everything about Spinnaker. They just say, hey, I need to implement these 2 interfaces, and I'm off to the races. I have a new stage now. And it feels really good to them to like, hey, I actually did something and I contributed this functionality without being a, you know, networking expert or whatever you might think you have to be in order to contribute to an open source project.
Okay, any other questions to Cameron? Okay. Thanks for the presentation, Cameron, and as usual, we action the people who visit our meetings. So if you could send the presentation you just shown us to the repo I linked in the chat as a PR, so people can pull down the slides and look at them offline. Again, please welcome to our upcoming meetings as well. As you know, as you see, we have users and different projects are represented here. And Spinnaker, we haven't had many people joining to these meetings from Spinnaker community. So if you could join us, that would help us a lot, the representation from Spinnaker community.
Totally, yeah. Happy to be here and join future meetings as well.
Thank you. So anyone wants to bring up a last minute topic?
I had one, and just something to share. So speaking of like Tekton integration, on the Jenkins side of the house, there is a presentation in the Jenkins community. It's tomorrow, and it's a Tekton trigger plugin proof of concept. I think some folks at Red Hat are looking at doing, let's say, a first level integration of Jenkins with Tekton, and so they were going to do a demo and just have a discussion around future Tekton integrations. So it's 7 a.m. Eastern, so a bit early for me, but we are going to try and encourage them to maybe reproduce that demo in this group or bring that discussion here as well. So yeah, we can start to see what Jenkins and Tekton integration might look like, what's the benefits, or yeah, just kind of trash it out.
If you have the link to that, like if you can put into minutes, so if anyone wants to join.
Yeah, that's then. Let me go hunt for it. I'll find it.
Yeah. While you are looking at it, I can talk about our next meeting. So we will have our next meeting on August 6th, and Andrew Baer from CloudBees will present Lighthouse. So please join to that meeting if you want to see the presentation and ask questions. And yeah, we have the link. Thank you, Tracy, for Tekton Jenkins POC, which is tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern time. With that, thank you all for joining today, and talk to you in 2 weeks, and have a nice rest of the weekend. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.